Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name's Amanda and in today's video we are going to be doing another Sims 4 speed build, and this is another one that's for the challenge I set myself to build a tiny home for each of the Sims 4 kits. So as the title suggests, today we are using the country kitchen kit. Now for this challenge, I wanted to challenge myself to only use base game, tiny living, as it is going to be a tiny home, and the particular kit. So of course we've got the country kitchen kit. Now I have had this kit in my collection for quite a while now, so I wanted to take all of the items out so that I could kind of just remind myself of their style, what's included, the colors and things like that, to kind of help get some inspiration for the build. So this kit predominantly consists of counters, which when you first kind of open it up and look at what's included, it doesn't actually look like there's loads included, but of course each of the counters and the island counters all have their different sections, and then there's lots of swatches as well. And one of the things that I did like about this kit as well is a couple of the colors, I'm not sure how many of them, but have the more, there's at least one or two I know that have the more shabby look to them, so they kind of look a little bit more worn. If you see these blue ones I've brought out, they have that more worn effect to them. And originally when I started my build, I went for the green ones that had that more worn shabby chic look to them, and then I swapped them out for a fresher looking set because it kind of matched the build that I was going for. You do get a nice sink to go that matches beautifully with these counters. There wasn't lots of clutter in it, and again I think that's because with this kit the number of slots for the different counters and things like that takes up a big bulk of the pack. But you do get a really nice sink, and I did love the clutter that was included. It's not actually clutter that I've used too often. And then something I did really love about this kit was the fridge and the oven. I don't use this oven very often, but I do use the fridge. I think it looks quite cute and it suits a lot of the builds I do, but the oven wouldn't necessarily. So anyway, once I'd got a bit of a look at the items that were in this kit, I decided I was going to go for a modern country looking build. I didn't want to do anything too country cottage or anything like that because I've done a lot of cottage builds lately. I was feeling doing something a little bit more modern, a little bit more fresh looking, but I kind of imagined that this sim loves the cottage core aesthetic, so I've kind of leaned into that a little bit to help bring in to help make the build match the kit, if that makes sense. So for this particular build, as I mentioned, it is going to be a tiny home, and I went for a tier 2 tiny home, which gives us 64 tiles to play around with. And I decided to kind of push myself a little bit and try and do an upper level for this as well. So it is a 2-story home, but that second story is simply only a very small bedroom that's big enough just for a single bed, because I did picture it would just be a single sim living here. Now when I was going through the swatches for this kit, I see that there was this beautiful sage greeny color. It's kind of like somewhere between a mint green and a sage green in the kitchen cabinetry, so I decided that I would lean into that color for my build. So I kind of throw in, as you can see here, the base of the build is quite like a creamy beigey color, but then we're leaning in and adding in those greens using the shutters, and I kind of do the same for the interior of the house as well. So for the build so far, I got the exterior shell done, and then I kind of just was coming in and trying to map out what the floor plan would be like so that I could get all of the windows on the exterior in place and know where I was going to put things like the front and back doors and how it was all going to work with the roofing. This is how I tend to build. I'll go in, I'll get my shell done, then I'll go and kind of jump backwards and forwards between the floor plan and the exterior of the house so that I can make sure everything's going to work. At times I will then have to come in and obviously tweak things as we're going throughout the build. But once I was happy with the inside working for where I've placed all of my windows and doors, I then did jump back to the outside And I'm kind of just grabbing some fences from Debug and some trees from Debug, as well as I wanted this to have that modern cottage look to it. So I wanted to make sure there was still some trees around the edge, so it kind of does, although it doesn't necessarily need to be placed in a kind of like countryside woodland area, it just made it fit in a little bit more. I really loved these larger rocks from Debug as well, to kind of make like a little rockery area there in the front garden, because I did want the front of this to look quite nice as well. I didn't necessarily imagine that this particular sim would be big on gardening or anything like that, but I wanted to make sure that the garden and the landscaping looked really pretty, as that is something that I really enjoy doing. The exteriors usually are my favorite to build in The Sims 4, so I love going in and playing around with as many little exterior details and landscaping as I can. I popped this little hanging basket on the roof there, and then I come in with some of these stepping stones from Debug to kind of make a bit of a whimsical looking front garden. So adding those in, it just looked better than doing quite a bold, blunt steps or pathway, if that makes sense. And then I'm just going to come through and add in a few last minute details out the front before we jump on inside the build, which was quite fun to do for this build. So as I mentioned, I wanted to make sure that there was a large kitchen, and first of all I picked these green cabinets in the more worn look to them, and then throughout, as we get a little bit further, I think it's when I come to doing the upper cabinets, I decide to go for the fresh new looking ones, just because like I mentioned, I wasn't wanting that cottage vibe for this house. I wanted it to look as though maybe this sim has bought a regular looking house, but the aesthetic she likes is cottage core, so she wants to come in and add that into her house without it necessarily having a full-on cottage look. Now I really love the amount of different upper style cabinets they have in this kit, so I tried to use as many of them as I could. They're not placed necessarily how they're designed to be placed, but I wanted to make sure I could fit as many of them in the build as I could. I especially love the small upper cabinet with the plates in it, but I do wish as well that they had included another one of that size, but where it was just mainly doors, just because that would work for certain designs a little bit more than maybe having duplicate of the plate ones. Because for example, a lot of the time I'll use these smaller upper cabinets and I'll have a couple of them going across the kitchen. That wouldn't really necessarily look right with the plate one. It wouldn't feel as though it would make sense to have more of that one. So I do wish they had included a different upper cabinet, same size but maybe just with the doors. But of course you can mix and match your cabinets, which is what I do a lot of the time as well. Something as well I forgot to mention, that this kit does also include one wallpaper swatch. So the brick that we've used there on, I used it on the outside and then I brought some of it on the interior, and then it does also include the floor stones as well, and I really loved the colours that were available in this. You would have seen that I did cycle through a few of them, but I went for the light cream one as I felt as though that kind of matched the vibes for the build. Now we have progressed through the kitchen quite quickly. It kind of come together really easily. I loved how all of these items worked nicely together, and a lot of them paired up nicely with the base game as well, because obviously I am restricting myself with what packs I use. So as I mentioned, we're only using base game, tiny living and the country kitchen kit here, so it did limit the amount of clutter there was to use. And I said this in the previous build challenge I did for this series as well. So previously we did the little campers kit, and I said that I noticed the hardest thing was limiting myself with the amount of clutter, because I really do like to go in with a lot of clutter. And if you're only restricting yourself to base game, tiny living, and in this case the country kitchen, there isn't actually a lot of clutter available. And I didn't want to keep repeating the same things from base game as well. So I was trying to clutter it up as much as possible, but obviously it's not overly cluttered, which again kind of works for a tiny living build anyway. I messed about with this little corner here a lot. I first of all went in with the table that I've moved into the living area. I think I end up completely not using that, but then I decided it would be nice just to add down the coffee station there and then the bin, and then I kind of just moved away from the kitchen. I really loved how it turned out, and I'm glad that I went for an open plan living and kitchen space here, because I feel as though it's just nice that you're looking out onto that really beautiful kitchen. Into the living area, there isn't actually a lot of space for the living room, but I did like how it turned out. I managed to fit in a TV. I thought these base game cabinets worked beautiful for this build in the darker green shade, although it's not the same as the sage they've got in the kitchen. It kind of just breaks it up from making the build look too samey, but at the same time it does match a little. So I popped down the books and a little photo on there, and then I'm just kind of adding some decor items around. These tables are from Tiny Living. I love placing one of these down, sizing down a second one to make it look like a nest of tables, because you can kind of slot it underneath, and I think it looks really realistic to the kind of nest of tables that are available in real life. Because we had that stone floor throughout the whole downstairs, I wanted to add in a rug in the living space to make it a little bit more cozy as well. And then I added in the lights. I think these lights are from a Tiny Living, but I felt as though they suited that modern cottagecore vibe quite nicely. But I did tie in the wall lights, which I feel have a bit more of a cottage vibe to them compared to what the main lights did. Moving on into the bathroom, I used this sink again here, but I used it in a lighter shade, so I went for this kind of like off-white color. I felt as though this matched the bathroom nicely. These are the newer tiles from the latest base game update, and again I felt they matched really nicely with that stone flooring. Again, I used the shelf from the Country Kitchen kit as well, but we've used it in a different colour. I felt as though this colour matched nicely with the top of the counter, but it's not necessarily the swatch of the shelf that matches that particular one. But I liked the little floral decals on this one because it kind of, again, really leaned into that cottagecore aesthetic. So I popped down the flowers and candles on there. It's a fairly decent sized bathroom for a tiny living home, so I didn't add too much in, but I quite liked how it turned out. Moving on upstairs to that tiny bedroom space, I did start off by going in with this darker green carpet, but I don't stick with this. I do stick with carpet up here, but right there you see I changed it out to the cream because I wanted to have more greens coming through from the decorative items and the furniture, and I felt as though it looked too much having a green carpeted floor as well. So I swapped that out for a more neutral tone, and then I went for these shabby chic looking wooden dresser and bedside table. I felt as though they just really suit that cottagecore aesthetic that I really wanted to lean into. I didn't overly clutter up this dresser because I kind of just pictured where it was placed. If this was real life, it would be so annoying if you knocked anything off of this because it would fall downstairs. So I just popped on some shirts or clothing pile, and then just, I think I come in a bit further along and add in some flowers on top of there as well. But obviously it was a really small space, so I didn't want to end up overly cluttering it up, but I did want to still make the room, I love to still make my tiny living houses still look quite lived in. So I played around a little bit with this room, and then I'm going to come in, and this was the finished result kind of thing. I just added in some lighting and left it as it was. I didn't add too many skill building items into this build because I kind of imagined this sim, because it's the country living kitchen we've kind of focused on the most, I imagined maybe she's heading into the cooking career, so that's what she spends a lot of her time skill building, and maybe things like the charisma skill, which you can get from the mirror, and maybe like logic, which again you can get from books, because there wasn't much space left to add in too many skill building items, which are what I usually like to add in to my builds. But where we have got the interior of the house done, I did want to pop out and put a small back garden space in. So I use those same fences from Debug, and then this same same raised planter bed area as well. Now I did really quickly want to mention before we get to the end of this video that unfortunately this one isn't available to download on the gallery. Right as I got to the end of this build, I think I was just doing the screenshots for the kitchen, my game crashed and I hadn't saved it since finishing the kitchen, and I lost the entire build. So I was absolutely gutted because one, it meant I couldn't upload it to the gallery, and two, it meant when it come to screenshots I could only get screenshots of the front of the property and the kitchen. So yeah, unfortunately this one isn't available to download on the gallery. I might try and redo it and then upload it when I get some time, but for now I just hope you all enjoyed watching the video. I really had fun doing this one, so if you did enjoy the video, please do give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment below, and if you're not already subscribed to my channel, please do. In the comments below, let me know which kit you would like to see me do next. So far I've only done a tiny house for little campers and the country kitchen, so we've got quite a lot to go through. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye bye.